Fran Urry, also Steve Johnson, and Dr. Craig McQueen for joining us today for an interesting discussion on steroids.
Well, there's a lot of folklore, Shelley, about whether or not athletes can beat drug testing. Some of it is based in fact, and some of it is just mythical. If the testing is done carefully, if the collection is done adequately, the probability of beating the test is pretty small.
But there are a few sneaky ways to get to get around it. Indeed, I guess the question is, in the case of Ben Johnson, why was he able to go all the way to the Olympics and never have been found out for use of steroids?
It's my understanding, Shelley, that the Canadian government does not test their athletes, Olympic athletes, before they come to the Olympic competition, as do the Americans. And perhaps this is why he was not detected.
Testing is quite expensive. How costly is it, Fran Urry?
Well, it varies depending upon what the substances that are being tested for would be. In the case of anabolic steroids, it's possibly among the more expensive of the drug tests that are performed. And including the collection and the analytical testing, it would vary from a low of $150 to perhaps as high as $300 per test. You need to look at it in two phases. The first is the collection phase. And the importance there is to assure, absolutely assure, the integrity and identity of the specimen. So there are very elaborate mechanisms that are followed to be sure that that specimen comes from that individual and has not been adulterated and has not been exchanged. And the second part, of course, is the actual laboratory analyses and using state-of-the-art analytical procedures and qualified personnel and instrumentation to perform these tests can provide reliable results.
But we'd like to hear your questions or comments for our guests here. Give us a call.
Why should they not be allowed to take the steroids?
Well, I could like to offer a comment on that. It has to do with the basic concept of what sport is all about, fairness and equity. And even at the professional level, you know, in the draft, for example, the team with the worst record has the opportunity to select the best athlete. And all that is an attempt to equalize out and really make it a fair, competitive event. And so they do attempt to have equality in sports. And whenever you use a substance, as in the case of anabolic steroids, that have such a pronounced potential benefit under certain circumstances, as Dr. Craig had indicated earlier, it's unfair if not everybody is doing it. And so since everyone cannot do it, since it's controlled in the extent that that's not a legitimate medical use, then the position is taken that we will eliminate that and put everyone on an equal basis.
So it's out of the spirit of fairness more than it is a health issue, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Well, it's
a comment this morning. Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment. Steroids aren't worth it. I'm a 27-year-old male, and I've had a mastectomy because of steroids, and they're just not worth it.
Some agricultural people are using them to build up animals, particularly in cattle, to make the beef larger. Now, if a beef is ingesting steroids and I have a steak, will I get some of the steroid from that beef?
Well, Shelley, what you're referring to there is a product that was used in the animal meat industry called diethylstilbestrol. But that has been removed from the market as no longer a legitimate drug to use in animal industry. It had caused vaginal cancer in women, actually in the children, the female children of women who were taking diethylstilbestrol in the third trimester, the first trimester of pregnancy in order to retain the pregnancy. But that has been removed.
And are there tests that make sure that there are none of those products put in beef now?
The USDA and the Food and Drug Administration carefully monitor meat for the presence of DES.
Let's go to the phones again and take another question or comment. Go ahead, please.
Hello, I wanted to know how long that they are detectable in your system.
And that would depend on the extent of drug taking by the individual, how long they had been taking, what level of dosing they were taking, their own physical state of health, how rapidly they metabolize the drug. There are a number of factors, and so it's difficult to say this amount of time you will remain positive and then after that you will be negative. There are just too many variables. But as Steve has indicated, 1 to 4 weeks for oral medications like stanozolol, maybe 1 to 8 months for the injectable types.
What are some of the more common mistakes? That they just take it too soon or before they're tested, or what is the most common mistake?
Taking it at all.
Well, yeah, aside from that, when they're trying to mask it, what type of mistake there? A lot of people wonder how this can happen.
I'm really not sure they're that conscious of the time elements of things. And when you look at the mental mindset of the athlete, who will do practically anything to get that competitive edge and win, the winning edge, then the aspects of whether or not they're going to get caught or whether there's a health effect really become very low value in their outlook.